We feature all of our sponsors and our members in our program today, the screens, the signage, and on our website, CED.org. But thank you so much. I'm not going to read them all because there are quite a few. Many have provided information on their organizations, and it's outside at the table. I would just encourage everybody to pick up information on all of our sponsors at the tables. We have a great conference today. You know, those of you who have been coming to our conferences for a long time know that we used to have very long conferences. We've shortened it today and trying to make it more responsive to everybody's needs, but it's a great lineup. We're going to have conversations on early education, on higher education technologies' impact on jobs. We're going to have our usual political panel. We're not a political organization, but we are going to have a political panel because it's going to be cathartic. You know, we're not a political, but it'll be cathartic. You'll hear impressive keynotes from Senator Daniel Sullivan of Alaska, Congresswoman Katherine Clark of Massachusetts, and Congresswoman Virginia Foxx of North Carolina. And then, of course, we'll begin shortly after our initial presentation with our awards luncheon honoring Laura Corrett, the President and CEO of Giant Eagle. So CED, just to introduce it real quickly, CED, for those of you who don't know, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan, business-led policy organization. We are 75 years old today, having started in the 40s with the development of the Bretton Woods Agreement and the Marshall Plan, just two little tiny pieces of policy in our country's history. We've been going ever since. It's a great group. Today we have about 180 members from business, academic, and civic communities. And so this year is our 75th anniversary, and I'm very proud to be leading the organization in this time. And to commemorate that milestone, we have published a book this year called Sustaining Capitalism, which is bipartisan solutions to restore trust and prosperity. There are copies outside, and the complimentary copies, we hope everybody picks one up. And if you have any trouble sleeping, this is a great book. I recommend it wholeheartedly. As a housekeeping note, the conference is on the record. It is being taped. I don't know where all these videos are going to end up, but Lord knows these days. It's just, I would encourage all of you to, we used to say, can everybody just turn these things off? Now we say, can everybody turn these things on? Go to your Twitter accounts. We are using the hashtag CED Policy Conference, so it's CED Policy, CONF. Say all sorts of good things about us. It'll be wonderful. And our Twitter handle is @CEDUpdate. Anyway, I'm pleased to open the conference with keynote remarks about the state and trajectory of higher education. And we're very fortunate to have Congresswoman Katherine Clark as our first speaker today. Since 2013, Congresswoman Clark has represented the 5th District of Massachusetts, and at both the national and the state level, she has long been a champion of reforming education so that it delivers more value to people. Her background is at the intersection of policy and education, having served as a state senator, a state representative, general counsel for the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services. So please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Katherine Clark.
Thank you, Steve. It is really a pleasure to be here with you today. As Steve said, I've been in Congress now for almost 4 years. But when I ran, I campaigned on ideas that I think this organization really reflects, that if we are focusing on families and the success of women economically, we are going to benefit all of our communities and our nation's economy. And those are themes that I see you supporting in the work that you do, both collectively and in your individual businesses. And I thank you for your leadership and your advocacy on workforce developments, families, and future economic success. I have sat on the Education Committee here in Congress, but currently I have moved to Appropriations. But this unlikely political journey for me really started with School Committee, where I had the very brave race of jumping into a local race when there were 8 people running for 9 open seats. So it was a great first run, and tried to keep that up ever since. But I think there is a real place for our business community to talk about education, and especially higher education, and what we see it looking like going forward. We know the established benefits of a traditional higher education path, and that a bachelor's degree has been one of the surest paths to financial success and to the middle class for students. And in Massachusetts, we enjoy the compounding benefits of world-class institutions of higher learning combined with a true innovation economy. And our investments have been a boon for tech, biotech, robotics, medical breakthroughs, and clean energy technologies. But we can also agree that the United States faces challenges if we want to maintain our leadership in a global economy. Since the year 2000, the United States has dropped from 2nd in college attainment to 12th internationally. And factors like skyrocketing student debt, the proliferation of online learning, the pace of automation, and the skills gap will continue to challenge and also create opportunities for the traditional framework for post-secondary education and for our workforce. One of the ways that we raise rates of college entry is to make sure that we are reducing barriers for success for all of our students, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their income levels. Because we know that students who have lower quality education experience face greater challenges in navigating college, prolonging the time and costs of completing their degrees. And more than a quarter of low-income students drop out of their degree program by the end of the 2nd year. And the vast majority of those who default on student loans have borrowed less than $10,000 and are less likely to have finished their degree. And those consequences, the damaged credit, the wage garnishments, tax return offsets, only reinforce a cycle of poverty and limitations on our workforce. One of the areas that we have to continue focusing on in higher education is one that you do so much work on and will be part of this conference and summit, is early education. Because we know that that investment is one of the very best that we can make in student success and leveling the playing field for low-income children, and for making sure that every child is reading at grade level by 3rd grade, because it's at that pivot point when children go from learning how to read to using their reading skills to learn, where we see windows start to close if they're not there. And to have that support and to be able to access quality early education and care for every family is critical to the success we want to see in higher education and making sure that we have the workforce of the future. I've introduced some legislation. The 21st Century Child Care Investment Act really aimed at making sure that middle-class families as well as low-income families are able to access quality early ed environments. I remember well the day that I discovered that my entire salary was going to child care costs for our 3 children. And I was fortunate to have a husband who was also working and in the workforce, but this isn't true for many of our families. And those child care costs alone can be prohibitive, and they affect not only our future workforce, but your current workforce, and how you're able to retain talent and support parents of young children as they try and navigate a very expensive and cumbersome system. So I really appreciate your emphasis and the work that you are doing around that. And I hope that as you look at it, you will also remember the importance with our youngest learners of looking at trauma-informed care. We saw in 2015 in Massachusetts that we suspended and expelled over 600 preschoolers and kindergarten students. Much of that is because these kids are experiencing trauma. They've been witness to violence. They're low income. They have highly stressful lives that appear in their behavior. And we have to find a way to address those concerns and keep children who are traumatized in our school system. So that's where our higher ed road begins. But we know that for our traditional student, one of the barriers that they see in higher education is cost. And it is an obvious barrier that limits participation in our economy. There are simple steps that Congress can take, that we can do today, that can help ease this burden for our students. One is to strengthen our commitment to programs like the Pell Grants and Perkins loans. We also have to allow students to refinance their federal loans. And we can take common sense steps to knock down some of these systemic and bureaucratic barriers that we see. I was meeting with the New England Council a couple of years ago with their higher education group, and they flagged for me that one of the #1 problems that they saw in their student bodies in institutions of higher learning across Massachusetts was homeless students. And they were discovering that many of their students were sleeping in libraries, had real hunger issues and food instability, were sort of cruising around as student lounges, got to know which doors were left open on campus. And of all the issues facing college students, that was the one that was identified by our business community and our institutions of higher learning. We've also heard a lot about foster children and helping them be successful in college. And we've introduced some bipartisan legislation to help reduce some of the financial barriers and to be able to focus on getting support service so our homeless and foster youth can navigate and come out successfully in higher education. One of the focus, I have a senior in high school, so this is particularly on my mind. Anyone who has tackled the FAFSA forms, you can only imagine what that is like if you are homeless or a foster child. There's just so much information that you can't compile. So part of what this bill does is streamline that and come up with a very simple system for them to be able to connect to the financial support that they are going to need. And as we look at reducing barriers, we have to keep in mind that as our college students change, now we have a situation when 1 in 4 students working toward a degree currently in the United States is also a parent. So we're right back to early education and its role in enabling parents to be in school and stay in school. I've been working hard to get what is the campus bill we call reauthorized. It is a bill that provides grants. The average grant is $103,000 that can go to either providing childcare on a campus or providing subsidies to students to allow them to go. I was visiting Mass Bay Community College out near my district in Framingham, and there were so many very well-behaved children in the library. Their parents had packed them snacks. They were there, but they're little kids, and it wasn't going to be long before they were on the move. And parents, we also saw bringing their children to school with them. If we want to encourage people to go back, to get new skills, to be able to complete a degree, to continue to have retraining, we have to have a way for parents to do that successfully. And for many of our students, this means school after work, and it is particularly hard, even more challenging, to access traditional childcare programs in that time frame. The unfortunate news is that the campus program is currently zeroed out in the House budget. So we will have grants that just went out recently for this school year, but unless we do something with this funding and do it quickly, next year these programs will totally disappear from their underfunded status that they have now. And as we look not only at how we can reduce some of these barriers for our students in traditional college settings, I think we also have to think about viable paths to new ways of looking at higher education and how it ties in with the high school experience. We know already the four-year college model is not for everyone. And to keep our economic engine really churning in the 21st century while addressing the rapid pace of automation, artificial intelligence, changing job markets, we have to have other paths to close this skill gap and keep a vibrant workforce. Millions of Americans also live and work in rural communities in which traditional post-secondary education is more difficult to access. So these so-called middle-skilled jobs, somewhere between a high school diploma and a four-year degree, have become high in demand and the fastest growing occupations today. It's led by jobs in healthcare industry, which are among the fastest growing careers. Half of all STEM jobs fall into this category, and 3 million infrastructure jobs over the next decade, including designing, building, and operating transportation, housing, utilities, and telecommunications. The conversation about how we close this skills gap is one about supporting a diverse workforce and ensuring that there are multiple pathways to the middle class. A common sense way to do this is some of the things we talked about with supporting non-traditional students, but let's also make sure that we have the training in place and the actual connections to make sure we're meeting the needs of business where these jobs are. One of the bills that we've worked on is looking at Career and Technical Education Act, the Carl D. Perkins Act, which provides federal support to state career and technical education programs. These programs serve more than 11 million students annually, and it really ensures that career and technical education is going to prepare all students, including historically disadvantaged and vulnerable students, for success in high-skill, high-wage occupations and careers in non-traditional fields. But there's been some great work done in a bipartisan. It is one of these bills that not only we have Republican support, we have Democratic support, but I know within my own caucus of the Dems, it's one of the few where we have blue dogs, new Dems, progressives, everyone coming together around looking at this career and technical education. And there are some important changes that we made that I think will be helpful to you and your businesses. One is that we've mandated that we have a local needs assessment, that part of your grant is showing that you understand the match between the vocational training that you are doing and the jobs that are available and that need the skills that need to be taught in order to fill those jobs. We have lots of anecdotal stories about programs that get established that are successful, like cosmetology, but are graduating too many in that number, and then there are hard times finding those jobs as they go forward. So we want to reward not only looking at the job assessment in our local areas and matching the training, but also doing a better job, of collecting the data and making sure that we are tracking student outcomes so we can increase the efficiency of this program and know that we are using our dollars in the best way possible. And I appreciate the support of many of you in this room who helped and encouraged this legislation. I think it passed unanimously twice now through the House, but it is held up in the Senate. And if any of you are here meeting with your members of the Senate, especially on the Help Committee, we would appreciate a good word for the Carl Perkins Reauthorization Act, because it's really a critical piece of how we look at higher education and how we are moving towards needing to be very nimble and flexible with our workforce. And are we really going to be moving to higher ed where people are doing a series of ongoing learning throughout their life, maybe a 2-year program with a work break in between, going back with stackable degrees so that people can keep moving up while they also have an income that is, really responsive to the needs of industry, to the manufacturing of the future, to the jobs that we are going to see. And I think that nimbleness in our workforce, those forces are going to be only more in demand on higher education and really re-envisioning how we create that dynamic workforce that we are going to need. And finally, we can't really have a conversation about higher education and not talk about the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. When LBJ signed this in 1965, he said the expanded opportunity in our education system would spread the roots of change and reform throughout the nation. And inside this critical legislation, we really do have the tools that level the playing field, strengthen our economy by empowering more students to access higher ed. And we have to have provisions reauthorized that help students afford and access higher education and ensure consumer protections for our student loan borrowers. So I also urge you that you have those discussions with your members of your congressional delegations about reauthorizing this critical tool for our economy as we have an eye towards making higher education more affordable, more accessible, reducing the debt on our students, and making sure that every student has a path to success and that we keep a vibrant workforce going. So I thank you again for your leadership, for your advocacy, and for being such a resource for members of Congress. We really appreciate the partnership. I hope you will feel free to call on me and my office, and I really do look forward to working together, and I'd be happy to stay for a couple of questions. I'm getting the time signal there, but do we have any questions? Yeah.
How are you navigating the current public education policy CED?
Yeah.
How many is opposed to the program you have?
Yeah, it's not easy. I've only had one viral moment since I've been in Congress, but it was with Secretary DeVos. It's not easy because a lot of this is happening on the regulatory level, and it's happening very fast without a lot of review. So we are trying to bring those things to light. We are trying to continue to work with the Secretary and make sure that we are looking forward and ways to reduce these barriers that we've been talking around in higher education. And we have lots of issues with the department, but particularly we are concerned about the rollback around some of the real consumer protections for students with private colleges, online colleges. We've seen a lot of our returning veterans really be victimized, and it's very alarming to me that those are being rolled back. And so it's part of why I think we really need to continue to push around this higher ed reauthorization that can codify some of these protections for our students and not let them be sort of subject to an administrative world where things can happen without much of a record and without much debate from members of Congress. But it's tricky to navigate.
So, speaking as a trustee of Swarthmore College, we are all very concerned about the new items that have been added to the tax bill and how they're going to think about endowments and many things. And I'd like to know what kind of response is mounting in Congress to attack this.
Yeah, as you can imagine, in my district where I represent Cambridge and Medford, I have lots of wonderful colleges and universities, and we have heard overwhelmingly from them. We also, not only is it the endowment issue, which we worry about, it's our graduate students turning the money that is often that tuition is what allows them to be in graduate school. Over 60% of the graduate school that will be affected by turning their tuition into taxable income are in STEM fields, exactly who we need to be leading our innovation economy. And we're hearing a lot about student loan interest being removed. And I think that I hope that you are weighing in, each and every one of you, on these issues. And, you know, anytime you do a tax bill, there are going to be winners and losers. There are going to be things where you may benefit and things where you may not. But we have to take a long view, and we cannot destabilize higher education and our right of all students to be able to access it. If we take all the social justice out of it, let's look at our economy and where that future is. And we are making some decisions that will have long-term, very negative impacts. And we need your voices in this. The House is scheduled to tee this up tomorrow for a vote. We got the bill, it's 429 pages long. Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee that I know had not seen the bill before it was released 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago. Members of the Ways and Means Committee were given 20 minutes to look at the manager's amendment, which is the huge 429-page amendment that can rewrite parts of this. 20 minutes before they had to vote. This is no way. This is not partisan. There is a reason we have process, and there's a reason it matters. When we've done tax reform in the past, it has been years of hearings. It has been countless experts weighing in. It is difficult, it is arduous, it is contentious, but it is necessary. And when we do major policy change like this, that affects the way our economy is structured and affects that, in some cases in this permanently, we can do long-term damage that we can't undo in 10 years from now. And I think we're really at risk, and it's hard to get people, energized around a tax bill, because tax cuts sure look good. Who doesn't want one? But it's part of our job to try and take apart the real effects. And for higher education is an incredible loser in this bill. And we need your support from the business community to make that case, because the Senate has a very different bill they're putting together. So this may pass tomorrow, it may pass on Friday in the House, but it will be back. And we really need you to weigh in on these issues for higher education. So on that uplifting note, I thank you again.